Welcome to the Bikeshed podcast, where we talk about all things software engineering, how to behave at your job, and how not to. I'm your co-host, keyboard shortcut hotshot, command line kingpin, and world traveler, Scott Kaye. And alongside with me today are my co-hosts. He built a CLI tool to generate our monologues. Coffee is incapable of crashing his motivation. His blog posts are the documentation. Matt Hamlin. And to my other side, cooking up takes hotter than your air fryer, Dillon Spicy Take Curry. Fellas, what are we up to today?
We're going to try to record a podcast, Scott. It's going to be sick.
Now I'm all out of intros, boys. I'll have to cook up another. I get Spicy Take to do it for me.
I mean, we've had a fairly long hiatus for recording, so I'm surprised that we didn't have a monologue or multiple monologues built up.
We'll create a backlog. Just assign me the Jira task, Captain.
Nice box.
That's right.
All right. Today, first, we want to start off with our stand-up segment. And then the sort of main topic that we want to dig into is about monorepos. Should you use a monorepo? Are they good? Are they bad? And maybe we'll talk a little bit about our experience working with the monorepo at Wayfair and maybe also at other companies since then. Dillon, do you want to kick us off with your stand-up update?
Sure. There's construction beneath me on the first floor of my house right now, and it's making it impossible to focus, but I'm here, and I'm going to be focused, guys. I'm also taking a few days off of work. I just feel a little burned out. We had like a big launch come up. Some of you, if you know where I work, you may have seen the outburst online. So it's been fun watching that happen and seeing how the company sort of adapts to that. And then what else? At work, I volunteered to be the guild lead of web, which really means I get to like help push larger initiatives for the web framework, I guess. Like the web teams, but it's really like do all the work that no one wants to do, is what it turns out to be. It's like really hard to get people like, interested in any of it. So I'm hoping to like get that put together in a way that can like help push the web further at Woop. So kind of excited, kind of like dreading it because I have a lot of other work to do. Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. What about you, Scott?
All right, so this is the one segment that's easiest that I didn't prepare for at all. So a few things. Starting off, I just got back from Italy like a week and a half ago. This is like not, I mean, it's old news now, but we haven't recorded in a while. It was great. We went to Rome, got to help elect the new pope while we were there. Went to Florence
You contributed
afterward.
to that?
Yeah, actually, I okayed it. I really pushed for the American pope. Went to Florence after that. Florence was probably my favorite. Also went to Venice. It was really cool to see that infrastructure and architecture, and just the fact that it's built on basically wooden stilts and concrete is unbelievable. Also went to Milan, like a small Italy's version of New York. Not as crazy at all. But then we went up to Lake Como, which is like borders Switzerland, and you could kind of see the Alps in the distance. Absolutely phenomenal. Best trip of my life. Maybe a little recency bias. Kenya was also unbelievably amazing. I'm back at work. I think the last time we recorded, I was really new. I'm still really new. I'm still technically in like a onboarding period for the company, but I got my first big project, and I'm just rebuilding GitHub. Not really, honestly, but basically we have a situation where teams are building workflows visually, and two people could be working on the same live version at once in isolation, and we never really solved concurrency for this project. So like we need a way for teams to be able to visually see the changes that occurred when someone pushes to live, and how do they consume those changes. Not sure exactly what approach we're going to take, but that's as much as I'm going to talk about it, really. So really actually exciting problem to try to solve, and I've done a lot of digging into how we would merge things, but it sounds like our focus is really going to be on presenting a visual diff, not a visual code diff, exclusively, but rather a like graphical diff in the UI, which is pretty freaking cool. So excited to execute on that, building some POCs on that right now. I also rebuilt some code that I open sourced about a few years ago with help from actually both of you guys. It was my like use keyboard navigation. We kind of like workshop through this together, and I rebuilt it using like useSyncExternalStore and just made it more modernized. And I also added some use cases for it where um, I was creating like a Command K search palette. And if you look at Spotify's in the app, I was using that as my reference. You'll notice that when you cycle through items, that like the focus is still on the input. So it's like a what is that called? Like not an autocomplete, but a combo box style. You can still be focused in the input, and you can still cycle through all the options, so you're not actually moving the focus. So I'm working on adding that to the one I've created, and hopefully reopen sourcing my project with these changes sometime in June if possible. And that was a lot. I said I didn't have anything prepared, but I just fired stuff off at you. I can spit verbal diarrhea, boys. Matt, what's up with you?
Well, first, I'm curious if you're using like the Command K library from Paco and company. That I think GitHub builds on top of it for their command menu.
No,
also.
so the Command K palette stuff is actually something we identified. Well, at work, in the UI, there are a lot of nodes and it's hard to navigate. So I've been working on navigation tools. So I started with a basic Command K palette that I actually built a dialogue modal with. So I took my concept. I think I learned this from actually Adam Argyle, shout out Google, how to use the actual dialogue modal in React, or sorry, the HTML5 tag dialogue correctly in React. I basically bare bones built something like that. And for now, all you can do is search through modals, but I'm talking about doing some crazy stuff in here that hopefully you can use this Command K palette as a way to ask AI to build your nodes in the future, and a really ambitious thing, but something I wanted to consider for this project in the long term. But really, this is so my project is part of a larger set of applications. So essentially, I built what I'm calling a search palette, but just Command K as a UI that can be consumed by multiple tool applications that I work with.
Nice. Cool. Let's see, my update. Just as like a sort of, I feel like I'm always like this at a normal stand-up where I just don't know what to say. Let's see. Yeah, it's been a while. At work, I've been working on like sort of rolling out this migration. We have this like crazy, like multivariant way that we handle translations in our Webpack apps. We literally have a field in our Webpack config that's like use modern LUML, and it can be the value of false or undefined, true, the string modern, or the string postmodern. And so we're trying to migrate everyone to the string to postmodern variant, which changes like how the translations are loaded and generated during build times. So that's been a fun migration to work through. Outside of work, I think in between episodes, I've like sort of rewrote my website. Before I was using Next.js, now it's using Waku, which is pretty exciting. Although it was really slow. I had like a lot of like delayed cold starts when I deployed it on Cloudflare. So yeah, I've been trying to dig into why that's happening, and found like a few bugs in the library along the way. Also, I think since we last recorded, I got my new keyboard, which I can show you guys. There we go. People listening won't see, but it's the Newfie Air V2 75, I think. And of course, like a week after I got my keyboard, they announced that they have the V3 model coming out. So we'll have to see. I think it'll probably be better, obviously, but I think it'll be like slimmer, which I'm excited for. So I might have to make that upgrade also.
Are you still in the? Can you still return it in the return window?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe I should look at that. I signed up for like their pre-order notifications, so we'll see what happens. I think I get a discount because I bought this one also, but yeah, I wonder if I can just return this and get the discount. Yeah, I think that's about it for my update.
Dylan, you didn't talk about your keyboard. You got a Newfie, right? I got 2 keyboards here. I can hold them up too. You guys can't see them. Maybe we'll take pictures for the website, Matt. What do you think about that?
Oh, it looks like trash.
That's straight up rude.
I bet you Scott's keyboards probably cost like 3 times our keyboards.
My keyboards are worth more than Matt's life, and he's over here nuking them.
Scott's keyboards are literally, he's like holding up gold bars compared to what we have.
This is Wayfair
Yeah.
stock put to use right here, boys.
Yeah, Dylan, how have you been enjoying your keyboard? You've used mechanical keyboards in the past, right? Like you've had other.
Yeah, I use them usually when I'm like gaming, not usually when I'm
Okay.
working. I got so used to using the laptop keyboard, and then I don't know. I've just gotten sort of tired of it over time, and everyone at my job has a mechanical. So it's like, I'll just join the club, and I've been really, really happy with it. Like, I love the feel of it. It's been much more enjoyable.
Honestly, I used to be fine with just using the laptop keyboard too, but until I had like COVID work from home, where I have the world's biggest monitor situation, basically, I just more comfortable with having the keyboard. But like, I'm able to kind of switch back and forth. Like, if I'm going to do a job remote or go to like California for a job or something, which seems to be where I go, I can deal with using the laptop keyboard. I usually just bring a keyboard at this point, but I kind of like the challenge of using different keyboards sometimes. Maybe I'm a masochist.
Yeah, I've been for the longest time. I was a hardcore Mac laptop keyboard user. So like even if had an external monitor, I would still have my laptop in front of me and using that keyboard. I still prefer it, I think, but yeah, this Newfie's been growing on me. Not too bad. That's my review. Not too bad.
Okay, you were complaining that the battery life was like not great, right?
Yeah, like I have it plugged in right now too because I swear I charged this like 3 days ago, and then this morning it's like, oh, it's at like 15%, and I was like,
You
oh
just got a
damn.
tight list.
Yeah, maybe I think maybe sometimes I'll like get away from my laptop for like maybe an hour or something. I forget to turn it off, and so it's just like sitting there on. But yeah, I feel like the keyboard battery should last a little bit longer. Hopefully, the new version's a little bit larger battery, but we'll see.
Cool. I just keep mine plugged in. No issues here.
You know what? I was just thinking we need like a spicy take police or a hot take police siren that we play when any of us have a hot take. Why don't we have that?
And then we don't need the segment.
Well, no, we'll keep the segment. I was thinking like a legitimate police siren. You're gonna get arrested for this take. It's so hot. Maybe an ice siren. Okay, that's enough. Matt, introduce our topic.
Yeah, let's get into a main topic. So, I think for people that have been doing software development over the past, maybe within the past 5 years or longer, for sure, but have certainly come to face the concept of monorepos. So the concept of monorepo is just like you have like a single repo of multiple different projects or packages or workspaces, usually that contribute to like the same end result. They're fairly popular at very large companies. So like Google is probably famously known for having a very large monorepo where like everything basically lives in the same monorepo. I think Facebook or Meta is like in the same bucket. But I think over the past maybe 5 years or so, they've like really started to catch on at almost every other company of any size. Yeah, there's been a lot of like sort of tooling that come out of it that's come around for it. And we can probably dig into some of those tools. But yeah, I'm just curious, like from your guys' take, like working in a monorepo versus working across multiple distributed repos. Like, curious if you guys have any early takes on like have you enjoyed working with monorepos? Do you hate them? Like, are you ambivalent to them?
I'll jump in. I've had exposure to like monorepos in 2 places, or maybe 3. I feel like when we were at Wayfair, we had I had our design system, which basically had its own, I guess, sort of monorepo. I can't even like think back that far at this point, but I will say more recently we have a monorepo, which is like all of our more recent Next apps are in there, and then all of the like internationalization packages and authorization packages that we have that are shared across those apps are like seated within their own like packages folder, which is like a sibling folder to the apps folder. And that's kind of, I don't like have a ton of strong opinions about how that works. I think I get a little bit more confused on like how you should decide when you need a monorepo, and like when you should decide you need a shared package. I think those sorts of things get a little bit dicey. And like when does it make sense that like you need a separate repo and that needs to be its own monorepo? So maybe like getting into further questions we can get into later, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
That's awesome. It's a good question. Like, so I'm assuming like if you don't do a mono repo, you're talking about having like all, I guess, would that be a poly repo or just like every service or tooling or application just has its own standalone repo? I don't know if it needs to be that isolated. However, I think like the reason, just to the Wayfair example, is like why we went so heavily on a mono repo is like if we take a step back, we used to have rapid development with our monolithic app, which I guess is very different than a mono repo because that's every single app living in one space. I think technically it's usually like front end and back end lives in the same space, but we didn't do that. But we had every single app living in one space. So it might not have been a true monolithic app, but whatever, it was close enough. So let's just say the monorepo structure came from we're not moving fast enough, everything is so far distributed. And I think there was a school of thought there that folks were used to reaching across the aisle by being in one repo and seeing all of the work that's available, and were then more likely to make changes across spaces. So creating a more collaborative environment of and making it more easy and discoverable on how you make changes. So I think there was necessarily like more of like a culture thing going on here that when we moved towards a microservice architecture and we decided like everything would just have its own repo, maybe almost to a fault, there is some sort of maybe fine line or you need to create some sort of set of rules as to how many or like when you make this decision. But as things kind of stretch out into multiple repos, you can create this knowledge gap or make it easier to introduce knowledge gaps. And I think it has a lot of factors that it depends on. So I didn't want to just say it depends, but it's more of like how big is the company, how many people are contributing to the thing that it you're trying to create a repo for, how fast do you need to deploy things, what's more important, rapidly deploying new features for you or stability. This gets into like something I was talking about in our Discord group. Deployment for us is really long, whereas at Wayfair, as an example, it's like how fast can you get something out? And I think there are different schools of thought on that as well. But it's really my general point here in this rant that I will end is it matters a lot to how the culture and what your expectations are, but also like what are you proposing to benefit and gain from? Do you expect multiple teams to work across problem spaces, or can you just isolate and silo things off more into their own repos? Or do you have like a really good structure for people to get introduced to a new repo and documentation and whatnot? I mean, AI is a great way to solve documentation, but what is your path? I guess I want to say as my last point, like Occam's razor, like what is the simplest explanation and or solution in this case for what you're trying to do based on your needs? And that's all my thoughts on monorepos. We're done.
All right, we end the podcast there. I think you kind of brought up some interesting thoughts there, Scott, and Dillon also. I think maybe it's worth, I just because we have like maybe the most shared experience of Wayfair's like code base and setup, maybe it's worth us talking a little bit about that because I think that was an interesting journey. Scott, you kind of covered it, right? When I joined Wayfair, at least, we had effectively two large monorepos, or not even monorepos, two large repos, right? Like there was no concept of separate workspaces or packages internally. There wasn't really a concept of like this code only serves this specific use case. It was like basically just a jumble of code.
Well, just that they technically were monorepos, but we always called them monoliths. Like in theory, a monolith would be the back end, front end, and everything is coupled together. But it at least had that deviation. So sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I don't know. Like in my mind, yeah, maybe that's something we should get to first. Is like, how do you define a monorepo? I think in my mind that like a monorepo is usually it's like a single repo with a large collection of code, but that code is structured in a way that it's put together of pieces, and it's not necessarily just a big jumble of mess, right? Like you could take a large code base that just has, for example, if we're working on the front end, like maybe only has a single package JSON and like manages all its dependencies there, and like there's no, you could reach from deep folder A to deep folder Z and like share code that way. It's like that necessarily, at least in my definition, wouldn't actually meet the criteria of a monorepo. In my mind, a monorepo is like
packages.
more structured of individual packages. Yeah, multiple individual packages that can be, you can sort of depend on each other, but they're relatively isolated and sort of in their own space, I guess, within the repo. So yeah, like Wayfair when I joined was like effectively two large repos that didn't have that concept of workspaces or packages. It was just like code being shared. Our PHP side was maybe a little bit more structured that way. Like we had sort of separate deployables, and the code was kind of within those deployables inside the repo, but our resources side was a little bit more jumbled up. And so what we did is like we went through this phase at Wayfair where we started to say what we call decoupling, where we just like said, okay, these big, huge repos are not helping us move fast enough, so applications could split out to their own repo, deploy independently, and whatnot. And then we ended up in a state where we had thousands of repos for individual applications and pages, and it was just hard to maintain consistency across them. And so then we, at least on the storefront side of things, opted for a monorepo to manage sort of a more consistent baseline across our storefront experiences. So that was like a 5-second TLDR of like the journey of repos at Wayfair. But I think it's I don't know, like as I was like thinking about it as you guys were talking, it's like there's multiple different ways for us to adopt monorepos. Like the way that Wayfair adopted a monorepo doesn't necessarily mean it's the same way that I don't know, Airbnb might adopt monorepo or Woop or HubSpot or whatnot. Like I think there's multiple different strategies. Kind of like what Dillon was saying, like Homebase had a monorepo for a while we were doing that decoupling effort, but it was decoupled from the rest of the code base also. So you could still have a strategy where you have like multiple different monorepos that still sort of contribute to the same sort of state of things. I think we tried to do monorepos at a time where the tooling was just not that great for at least Homebase's use case. I think back then it was like Lerna was the state of the art for managing workspaces, and we were using Yarn Classic, and a lot of things sort of jumbled together to make it work. Nowadays we have like better tooling for monorepos. I think probably because more and more companies realize that they could probably get benefit out of sharing code in the same repo. And so we have tools like Turbo Repo and a variety of other tools that have sort of built up support for monorepos to be better than where they were. So like PNPM is a classic example of like, it's like really helps support the concept of monorepos with their like catalog features and workspaces and things like that.
Basically, I think that one of the reasons I don't have really strong opinions with monorepos right now is I'm at a company which is like, I would say mid startup stage, where we don't have the resources for like a team that just focuses on like the infrastructure of our code in a sense. I feel like at larger companies I've worked at, there's like usually a dedicated team that's thinking about that and thinking about how we can like make sure our code is being shared properly. And and when you're at a smaller company, it just comes down to like someone having that interest and putting in this extra effort that's like outside the work that you're typically doing. So it's like it's hard for me in my current work right now where I'm like so feature focused on building features that like as long as I can ship the code, I just don't really care about the surrounding pieces. Not to say that like monorepo doesn't matter, but it's definitely helping me because we have it, but like I haven't had like much of a chance in my current role to like reflect on whether or not what we're using is even like good.
Yeah, I still think it's like really important to be constantly looking at like the shape and needs of your company. Like you're saying, like having a team that's constantly thinking about these things is very important. But like I feel like whatever solution you pick, once it becomes mature, you usually start to see the faults, and that might take some time. And this like whole thing can be a vicious cycle, like kind of a grass is always greener problem that occurs where, if you have a mono repo and one of the faults is being like, how do we keep pipelines super fast? We have all this tooling, it starts to get slow. And then it's like, oh, should we just have multiple mono repos? Should we have just repos per project? Things will be faster that way. But then if one of your needs is like, no, we need people to be more collaborative and be able to discover things, like how do you balance those two things? And just understanding the shape of your teams and your makeup and how they work has a lot to do with like what path we're going to choose here.
Yeah, I think kind of reaching back into history a little bit, like I think that's 100% the trade-off that Wayfair made when we opted to go down the road of monorepos. Is like at the time we wanted to value consistency and sort of a baseline standards across our storefront experiences that were in multiple separate repos, and it was very difficult for us to maintain that consistency across those repos. And so we opted for a monorepo to solve that. And we sort of traded off at that time, whether or not we knew it, the pain points that come with managing code in a single repo, right? Like the fact that you have 100 plus contributors all pushing changes to the same repo and managing pipelines and managing merge conflicts and deployments from there is like, that's a pain, right? And so we sort of traded that off and said, we'll just put our effort into solving that problem versus solving the like, how do you have consistency across a distributed architecture? And yeah, I think it's interesting. It's like I think there was some early on discussion of like, could we just build, like, instead of doing that trade-off, like try to build the tooling to make a distributed architecture work, or distributed repo architecture work. And at the time it just seemed like, all right, let's just use open source tools that help manage monorepos. And it's like, I think those did most of the work, but didn't solve like the 100% use case that we needed. And so it was like still a complex problem to solve, like ensuring that you have fast iteration velocity and also consistency and safety across the board is I think it's just like I don't know, it's like pick two sort of thing of like consistency, speed, and I don't know, some or pick one maybe out of those two. Can't think of the third pillar there, but
I agree with that, but I also think that like consistency itself is can be difficult. Like you can get consistency in some senses of it. Like we're all using the same shared like template or layout, but like teams are going to deviate. They always do. Like one of the biggest things we were picked monorepos for are consistency, but there's when like using Homebase, using the design system as like an example, if a team was like, we want the component to do this, it was always, oh, create your own version of it. And when that becomes like a norm and we have this mono repo and people are like kind of recreating something with one little difference, you're still going to lose some of that consistency. So there are trade-offs with that one too. But I do agree with like your overall premise is absolutely correct. Like we're going to get more consistency for sure. And we're going to hopefully get speed or like awareness or discoverability. But like getting all of it at 100% is really tough. It's like that classic 80-20 where it's like, yeah, we might get 80% more of it,
yeah,
but getting that last 20 is next to impossible. And that concept creeps all the time because like just moving to that mono repo, we still have that classic 80-20 of two different large infrastructure changes. So sometimes like it's very complex to weigh how do all those things kind of work together, and do we still get the results we're looking for or enough of the results we're looking for?
Yeah, I have like maybe a tangential thought, but I don't know, Dillon, if you wanted to talk a little bit about that sort of speed question.
Yeah, I sort of thought about it while Scott was talking, is whether or not like monorepos slow you down or speed you up. And I think if you have good tooling and you're using the tooling exactly the way it's in the documentation, like for the most part, it's going to speed you up. But I've seen cases where it will slow you down, and that can come down to like how your continuous integration is set up. It's like the first thing that comes to mind. And maybe you guys have seen situations where like you make a change to one package and then everything depends on it. So then you end up having to like rebuild and redeploy everything. And next thing you know, like your build's taking 30, 45 minutes. Maybe not, hopefully not that long, but it's possible. And it just starts to feel like, why am I redeploying this other app that I just didn't care about or touch? So yeah, I'm just wondering, like, how do you guys feel about that? And like, how are there like ways that you're solving it that, like maybe it's like only redeploy the things that I'm trying to make changes for? I don't, in some sense, like, is there some better way to do that that I just don't know about?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't found like a solution to that problem. I think it's like a part of me thinks that one of the core contributors to that pain point is that so many developers are sort of brought up on like the, don't repeat yourself sort of concept. And so you end up creating a library that, solves a need. And then someone else sees like, all right, I need 90% of that. And so they go to abstract that shared library. And now two things are dependent on it. And they just keep kind of like building up this chain of dependencies instead of opting to, like in the short term, maybe copying and reusing the code instead of like building up an actual like package dependency upon it. I think that obviously you don't want to like always copy all code, right? Like you can't aim for, like, I don't think it's reasonable to reach a point where you have no dependencies and you manage all your own code. But I think it just like sort of feeds into this like sort of thing of like, oh, this code already exists, so I'll just like build a dependency on it instead of like pull in the parts I need or whatever. I think that's just like a main contributor to that kind of like, you start building up this like web of things that everything basically like invalidates the rest of it when you go to make that change. I mean, it is interesting also that like, even if you don't have a monorepo, if you have like a more of a monolithic code base, like making a change like that probably also results in deploying everything anyway. So you're kind of like back at that state, even if you move to a monorepo, like you're still back to that state where it's like one small change redeploys the whole world. I don't know if, maybe Scott, you have some thoughts on like ways to optimize that or whatnot.
I'll jump in real quick, Matt. You made me think of something at Wayfair, like monolith versus monorepo, and how like we're talking about like with a monorepo, there's a con of you change a dependency and everything needs to be rebuilt and redeployed. But the nice thing in the monorepo is that it's all like clearly connected, and that can work. But in a monolith situation, we have an example of like we upgrade a major version on the design system, and now there's no connection between the other things that depend on this package. So when we make that change, we have to like just tell people to go upgrade or like automate a PR and have them merge it. And like it's just so much. It can be like the trade-off of the extra time and CI and dealing with that. It seems kind of worth it when you look back and think about how disconnected that was or can be.
Yeah, this gets me to back to like kind of the tangent that I was thinking about heading down a little bit, is that I think in many ways, adopting a monorepo is like adopting a technical solution to an organizational problem, right? Like you could say that there's technical problems underneath that you're solving for, but really you're like, especially at Wayfair, we were adopting it to solve the problem of like keeping teams aligned on coding patterns or like themes or like, like the actual version of the design tokens that they're using, for example. But we could have solved that with, maybe a single team maintaining all of that. And like, it's like, okay, they just need to push across multiple repos or something. You could have solved it via other solutions, but instead reached for a technical solution. Because I think in general, like, and maybe this is like a topic that we need to cover, but it's like, I think most technical solutions that are adopted are usually solving for organizational problems rather than technical issues. I think monorepos is just like a very good example of that. It makes solving that organizational problem far easier.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why we did it, right? I think the problem was like we moved to a microservice architecture at Wayfair, and then it felt like people couldn't get anything done. But then when we moved back to a mono repo, like ironically, people still had a lot of reasons why we couldn't get things done. We focused so much on just like I hate this term, but lift and shift. Like the concept of like how can we throw everything in a new space, but avoided the hard problems of like how do we make it so we can actually do this fast?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's like obviously, I think if you're in leadership, you never really want to say, yeah, let's spend the I don't know 9 months rewriting stuff. It's like you never want to say that you're throwing away all that stuff. I think it's just like the common like sort of sunk cost fallacy of like, I feel like if you're in leadership, you don't see it as a sunk cost, you see it as a investment. It's like the flip side of sunk cost, just an investment in something, and like don't throw away your investment, keep it, but like move it to something new. I think that's like just a common mindset, right? I think that was but especially common at Wayfair, for sure. I'm trying to think if I had any other thoughts on repos. I think maybe they were jumping the gun a little bit to spicy takes. I think at this point in time, now that I've seen sort of like contributed to us adopting a monorepo at Wayfair, and then sort of seen maybe the opposite of it at HubSpot, where it's very distributed, and instead HubSpot leaned a lot into building the tooling to help manage many repos. I think at this point, like my spicy take is like I think monorepos are, maybe over what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of like overvalued across multiple different companies. I think it's like something that people say like, oh, that's going to be our silver bullet, and they adopt it and then realize that they still have many of the same pain points, or slightly different pain points, but things that they probably could have solved it a different way. I don't know. I feel like the spicy take is that monorepos are overhyped.
So I got a question to that, but how's cross repo collaboration work there? Is it more so like maybe because Wayfair folks weren't trained to reach across the aisle, or it was like not a norm, whereas HubSpot maybe ingrained that as a norm from the beginning, and it's not a problem? Or how does that work there? Give us a little context, a little insight as to how you see that working, or maybe the engineers are just really good in that space and they understand cross team collaboration.
No, yeah, that's a really good point. I think it for people that have been here a while, I think it's like that norm is still there, or that culture of like just like find a problem and like solve it in someone else's code base, like go for it kind of mindset. I think that's present for the people that have been here for a while, but for the newer people, I think that's not the case. And I think we've gotten to a point where teams are very siloed and isolated, which is like, it's an interesting, sort of, my initial take was like, okay, that's not good that teams are so isolated and siloed, but actually those teams have full control over how they deliver on their results, and it works out for us so far from what I've seen, right? Like those teams are, it's, I don't know, like 4 engineers or something for a specific feature, and they just own it wholly, and there's not that much that contributes across, like that they need to touch in terms of like things outside of that feature. On the face of it, it seems bad, but it actually works out pretty well, is what I've found so far.
I have a lot of thoughts in terms of just like what sort of leads to monorepos, or like what sort of leads to the separation of repos, and like why we've gone to monorepos over time. And I think it's like sort of adding on to something Scott said earlier about like discoverability. And one of the things I've seen where I am now is like over the last 8 years or so, that it was more of like a monolithic multi-repo setup where like different services are in different repos. And I haven't even seen them in the Java side go into a monorepo setup. It's still working in that way. But anytime you're sort of considering where should I make my changes, When it's in separate repos, it's really, really hard to know where to make your changes. One part of that might just be that GitHub search is terrible. So finding that stuff is really, really hard. But putting it all in one repo, now everything's like locally searchable. It's really, really easy to find and make changes and wrap it all up in like potentially one PR versus multiple PRs. It's just much easier to keep a mental model of like how your organization services operate and like connect. I've never worked anywhere where like the entire company has a single monorepo. It just sounds insane, and maybe that's only something a Google engineer has experience with.
I was just going to also say, and like if you're in a monorepo, you're more likely to discover the dependencies you need to solve something. Whereas like if you have things split up more and you need a dependency to do something, you have to do more work and research to see if other teams are using certain things. So like things are more available to you. But like on the flip side, it also to me just like kind of like you need to strategically break down the team in a certain way. Like at Wayfair, you know, some teams would own like a homepage or the product page, and that those things tend to create silos. I think Dillon was pointing out when you have a lot of engineers that tends to start to do that. That's totally true. And I don't want to pretend that I know the best way to set up a team, but yes, people will be more likely to discover things and be able to contribute, which is good. But also how you structure the team. Like, and my example would be like put 10 engineers on the actual application and then 10 engineers on the tooling, and you might have maybe silos in a sense, but you might have a little bit more of a clear set of boundaries that you don't need folks to reach as often over the aisle. And you know that then silos folks into certain types of jobs. But then yeah, like maybe we're getting more into like a HubSpot like architecture without the multiple repos. It's just within one repo. But all this is to just say, I'm not saying one way is better than the other. There are pros and cons to each approach, and you really need to strategically think about what's the value you're trying to gain. And using Wayfair as the example as we have, theirs was speed. So they want to deploy fast. They want to get features out fast. I would argue that speed should, this is my fireworks past talking to me, that speed should not be your only or your number one goal ever in just about anything. While it can be a goal complementary to a broader goal, you should never pin yourself on how can we do things as fast as possible, because that you will never be the fastest, or one day you might not be the fastest. As you grow, that's hard to maintain. So just like really understand like your organization and try to balance those tricks. Like I could go on about speed, but just a hot take that, and I'm not talking about performance, but speed and execution is not the thing to put all your chips into that one basket.
I feel like I'm gonna go on a tangent about like team setup, but I feel like when I was more entry level, I feel like I had zero say in like what the team setup should be. I guess quick question to you guys is like, do you feel like as you progress through your career, you have more say in like the division of how a team should be set up or a project? Or is it still like kind of come down from leadership? I feel like I'm going down on a whole new topic, but yeah.
I once had the opportunity at Wayfair to tell John Klein how I thought the pod groups should be structured. And as a cop out, I actually thought they were structured pretty well. And I didn't know better at the time. But I'm going to give him a kudos on that. That's the only leader who's ever asked my opinion on structure. I think more leaders should be receptive to people who are in the trenches thinking about those kinds of things. But I don't really feel like I've had, I've definitely been vocal about it, but I don't really feel like I've had that ability.
Yeah, maybe this is a hot take against Wayfair, and I'm sure we have tons of them, but I actually spoke with Spencer Wednesday, Spencer Gregson, which maybe he listens to the podcast, maybe not.
Shout out.
And I was basically saying like, I feel like Wayfair just overhired, and then we were like forced to create tons of smaller teams that had very narrow focus. And then from my experience, felt that like that made it extremely hard to make it any sort of large impact across the web app. So if you wanted to like make a change that changed the critical flow in any way, it was like, okay, now I need to get 6 teams to do work for me because 6 teams own that part of it. I know I'm just ranting about Wayfair, but this sort of does lead into the same situation of like the organizational structure of like how a monorepo it like comes to a monorepo at some point.
I mean, I want to say a general statement, but it'll probably be proved wrong. But I feel like 9 times out of 10, like most people think that their team could be better structured than it is. I think, and Dillon, I think you kind of touched a little bit on this also of like, I think anytime a team goes over a certain number, like, I don't know, 6, 8, 10, something like that, it's like you can't have a single team anymore. And so you need to split. And then once you introduce that split, then just things are not going to work out the way you want. Like it takes a lot of time and effort to try to make 2 different teams or more than 2 different teams sort of work the way that you want it to work. And I think the sweet spot is always going to be a single team that's relatively tight and like, I don't know, maybe we're kind of like basically reaching for the Dunbar number or whatever of like, or, the 2 pizza sort of rule of like management where it's like, you don't want more people than what 2 pizzas can serve for a pod outing or something.
I guess try to tie this thought back into monorepos. Do you guys find that when you're working with or when you've seen multiple teams working in a monorepo, do they have like siloed ownership within the monorepo, like certain parts? Maybe this like ties into code owners too, but just want to hear your thoughts there.
We saw this at Fireworks also. It's like there were parts of the repo that were for maybe at the time slightly more experimental aspects of the product that we were building out, and that was like fairly. It wasn't necessarily that we were like recommend to not touch, but it was just like you could definitely see the boundaries, right? Like you could see like this is the thing for maybe more of the web team, and this is the thing for more of the like experimental team or whatever like whatever that split is, and like it wasn't necessarily strictly forced, but it was like I think it was just a natural thing that came out of like that split, like they're working on different things, and it sort of like naturally enforced this separate boundary or sort of silo.
Which, as much as I wanted to work on some of that stuff, I actually think that was more correct. That's more towards the example of Wayfair I gave, where it's like you guys are working on this one project, we're working on this one project. Velocity might be a little bit quicker. I mean, we had way less people there, so we probably could have crossed projects, but I think that will get you in a speed cycle a little bit faster. Just to piggyback on the speed thing, Matt and I had a little bit of side conversation. Matt believes speed is incredibly important. I just want to clarify that I agree that it is, but I don't think speed should be your only goal. Like if you don't know what your goal of what you're doing or why you're doing something, and the answer is only speed, then you don't really know what you're doing. I don't know how else to describe that. Like speed is almost something that happens to happen with everything. I agree with Matt in the sense that it is incredibly important. Like performance as an example, speed is the number one, even though I said it wasn't an example earlier. But like AI, I would argue, is like, yeah, you want to go maybe fast with getting something there, but at the same time, you want to be strategic about how you use AI. I think we've talked about this in the past. You don't want to just yeet out a bunch of AI features that don't help people. It's the same thing with building features. I think at Wayfair, we had maybe a lot of autonomy to just build new things and be like, we're going to try this. But also, you don't want to do that and build crap experiences. And also, you need to build it in such a way or test it in such a way that like you can actually identify if you've made a proactive positive gain, which I think in e-commerce is incredibly hard. You basically have to run a test with the same pool of people at the same time and see if people checked out more. The data for that is like incredibly challenging. So whether or not a feature does better in that, it's a hard thing to quantify. But basically, just want to clarify that speed itself is an important factor, but it shouldn't be the factor, only single motivating factor for execution.
Yeah, and I think as you were talking, I realized like it's not necessarily speed that I think is critical. I think it's velocity. I think the key distinction there being that velocity is like, for physics majors or whatever, it's like it's not only the speed, but it's also the direction, right? And I think that's like the critical aspect is like speed is like you can move as fast as possible, but you could be building the wrong thing, right? But velocity means that you're moving fast, or high velocity means that you're moving fast and in a direction, and maybe that that direction needs to be guided. But I think generally speaking, like if you have that right, and this is like we're getting pretty far off the Monorepo topic, but I think if you have the right velocity, everything else can be solved. Like if you're moving fast and in the right direction, like you can solve any problem on top of that.
It's related to why we picked a monorepo, but I think we're again like kind of saying the same thing. But I agree in the same sense of velocity. Like we want it to increase the ability to deliver. Essentially, I agree with that. But like, is that the only thing that you're gonna get from it? Like, I guess like, are we delivering the right things? Like, does it allow us to actually make gains? Like, there needs to be some sort of North Star, in my opinion, about what we're building towards. Because velocity could be great if we can churn out way more work, or we could build things faster. But if we don't know what we're building towards, we don't really, we're not making strides essentially. Any other thoughts, folks? Like, I feel like I ranted too many times. Matt ranted a few times. It was
I feel
good.
like coming into this, I was maybe my brain was too filled with other nonsense. So it's like really hard for me to think of certain reasons monorepos either suck or are great. And I feel like I'm coming away with a lot more pros than cons. I just want to like call out really quickly. One of the things I thought about was that one of the really nice things with monorepos is you just have so much more sight into what other teams are doing. And like we didn't really dig into code owners. Maybe it's a separate episode, but that the code owners has the potential to maybe have someone from another team have to approve your changes, but also just like tag them on a review so that like you have the best people at your company possible that like know the most about a certain part of your system to come in and review that code for you. And when you're working in like siloed repos, you're sort of just limited to the expertise of your team, and you sort of you cut yourself off from like a lot of really smart people in your org. And there's like within a monorepo, if you're using code owners in a certain way that like gets your arties and your Joes to look at your code, those are real people, by the way. Then like you're gonna feel a lot better about like you're gonna be a lot more confident about your changes. They're gonna point things out that like you didn't think about. And having that is I don't know. One, it's like really nice to be able to work with those sorts of people and learn a lot of things from them. But yeah, you're hopefully gonna like have a lot better quality at the end.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think I've also like especially on my current team right now, I've seen like the bad side of that. And in the like we're in this interesting moment where like our teams are scaling, and so we have like more and more people contributed to this repo that we work in. But the people with the domain knowledge or the domain expertise are there's not that many people that know that much about the tool that lives in our repo, and they're moving further away from it. And we did have this sort of strategy where like we sort of had a single code review. I mean, we're kind of getting into the code owners topic, but we had a single code owners group that would be round robin assigned reviewers on PRs, and we found out that like actually there's so many different teams contributing that's not scaling anymore, and we're actually going to start reaching more towards the isolated like okay, if you're making a change to the testing code of this repo, then only ping someone from the testing team or the team that owns like how we run tests or whatever. But if you're making a change to source file analysis, then ping the dev tooling team. Or if you're making a change to Webpack or RSPack, then ping our team. And it's an interesting. Like I agree. Like I want it to be more distributed, and I think that's like the way to like make sure people are kind of kept up. But I think you start to get to a point where it's like you can't keep that up. I think, or it's like very difficult. Like a lot of things are moving against you to try to keep that up, and it's hard to know. How much should you fight back against that versus just sort of let it happen almost.
Yeah, what you're saying makes sense. It's like you got to find the balance of like how much time do I have in a day to like work on what my team's working on and also like keep an eye on everything else the company's doing. And that can't grow so far that like you're completely like I don't know, you get frozen in a sense when you have too many things to keep track of. Like I see that even when I'm working at Woop, where I'm like trying to solve for so many different things that I start to feel like I'm not moving anymore. And I think that can happen to teams where like you start to own too many things, and then next thing you know, you're not like able to make progress on anything.
Feel that. Preach. I had like a last point on monorepos, just to kind of talk about. I know like Matt kind of would use monorepos as his like go-to architecture, and I kind of piggybacked off of what he had done for that. I think that that's kind of nice. My first thoughts originally was it's overkill, but I think it's kind of nice when one person's working on it because you have the understanding and knowledge of how it all comes together. But could it be overkill? Yeah, it's probably a lot. If you think you're going to have two packages, do you really need them in that repo? I mean, it's kind of nice, but if you have, it's more set up for like a long haul, large kind of thing. This is like relevant to monorepos, but it's more of a tangent thing I just needed to bring up.
It's fun. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Scott, because originally, a year ago at this time, I was like, I want to set up my my open source side project template is going to be a monorepo and not like a single monorepo, but every single project would have its own monorepo. And I think at this point, I've realized like that is totally overkill and is the wrong default. I've like flipped 180 and said, no, I don't like certainly there are benefits to monorepos, but at the rate in which I was churning out new side projects, it's just like wasn't worth it. Maybe it would be different if it's an actual like single monorepo where like every side project is just a new package in that monorepo, which could work. But I realized also like that there's just like scaling costs to that I couldn't maintain in terms of like at the time I was deploying. So I like docked site to Vercel, and Vercel had limits on how many things you can deploy from a single repo, and there's all these other limits that are difficult for a single person.
That's a good approach for you to go all in on when you go all in on Hamstack.
True. But it's just like so many tools, like even though we've had this like sort of resurgence in monorepo tooling over the past 5 years or so many other tools are still very don't support monorepos that well. I think GitHub is a really good example of something that doesn't actually support monorepos too well, right? Like if you think about issues and PRs, there's no way to refine down like this issue relates only to this package in this repo, right? You have to rely on additional context added to the title or the description to say like this only impacts this package, right? There's a way to like filter that down easily. You have to build up all this other stuff to it. I don't know. I think it's just like it's not the right default for the work that I'm doing, I guess. I think there are teams that can make monorepos work, but it's just like it's not a silver bullet, right? You have to do additional work to make it work.
If you see it growing, it could be worth it, but it depends. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Dillon.
No, my point was just like that's sort of a callback to one of the first things I said at the beginning of the episode is that like at my current company, we don't have dedicated team or resources or time sort of set aside to spend time managing the monorepo, setting it up, making sure it's like functioning as it should. So it can be really hard, like especially when all you're doing in your personal projects is you're just standing up POCs. Like you're going to be spending 2 times the amount of time trying to set up your damn monorepo when you could have just like set up your POC and like validated that idea works. Yep. So I think that can happen at startups too, where it's like, dude, in July I gotta launch this product. I don't have time to like set up my monorepo. Like who cares? Like I just got to get the code shipped. Like that North Star, yeah, for sure. I want to get there, but right now is just not the time.
Focusing on the goal, huge.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Any other further thoughts here? I think we've kind of ranted and rambled along this topic, but I think it was a good discussion on monorepos and like their aspects and like not necessarily maybe we do an actual episode on monorepo tooling or more specifics. Feel free to rally out and throw us some thoughts on Discord or on our Blue Sky account or whatnot. Happy to dig into more topics that people have.
Is it time for spicy takes?
If we have them.
I mean, yeah, we could jump into it. I feel like I shared mine during the discussion, but yeah, let's Scott, what's your spicy take?
I think we're in a golden age of CSS, my friends. This is a golden age. You folks were saying to me, you don't know what that means. But basically, I think we're at a point, or we've been in a point where we're getting a lot of new features. They're getting supported pretty rapidly that are making CSS and code simpler and easier to write. I don't want to get too into the specifics, but more and more APIs are coming out that are solutions we've been solving with JavaScript. They're just going to reduce the amount of overhead and complexity. And a lot of these things, when you add them in, like if they just don't work, you just don't get them. So you could do with progressive enhancement, they say. So I just think that we're at a point where we used to have to worry like, oh, go on this browser. Does it work for this thing? And maybe that's more of an enterprise level thing. Although I did it at some startups because everyone would use Internet Explorer back in the day. But I just think we're at a point where you can do it. CSS isn't like a culprit that's slowing you down, and rather it has multiple tools that get you to get what you need done faster.
So I would actually argue, and I know this isn't the point of this segment, but I would actually argue that a lot of the stuff that's been added to the CSS spec is really terrible over the past few years.
That's a hotter take than mine.
That's my hot take because I think it's a hotter take than you because all right, I tried out anchor positioning. It sucks. It's so complex to manage anchor positioning, and you can't handle the dynamicism that you get with a JavaScript tooltip library.
It's not even
right?
available.
You want to position it to the right if there's space. It is available
for Chrome.
Anchor positioning isn't supported.
It's hardly supported.
No, it's supported in multiple browsers. It is.
All right, I guess
Dillon, go ahead.
My hot takes is reactions to the hot takes at this point. But I guess my hot take is like you should just not care about CSS anymore, and you should just put your trust in one of these frameworks like Radix or however you say it, ShadCN.
It's only supported in Chrome, and it's only supported in Chrome.
Wait for these frameworks to like learn how to use it, implement it, and give you an easy way to use it, because that's kind of the way of the web nowadays.
Are you talking about Popover? Because that I think is a little bit more supported. Is it Popover?
No, I'm talking about another example is the CSS carousel stuff.
That stuff's simple.
Okay, listen, like I'm all for like making it easier for carousels to do, but it's not accessible.
Well, carousels are not accessible.
It's horribly. No, I know, but like the CSS carousel spec especially is even worse for accessibility than writing your own.
You're talking about snap positioning.
I'll have to dig up a link to this article.
Snap positioning.
No, not snap positioning. Like this new CSS.
Then
CSS
I'm not aware of
stuff.
I'll give you that. All right. Well, I was referring.
Yeah, it's absolutely atrocious for accessibility. So I don't think we're in the golden age at all. I think golden age was Flexbox, and then anything after that it was like.
Well, I'm literally including
we're
Flexbox and Grid. We're in a golden age. It's like.
Oh, Grid's trash.
All right. We're done. Episode's over. I can't anymore. You can say the API is convoluted, but Grid is actually like a good solution. Because it is convoluted. I'll give you that.
I think you're just wasting time if you're writing CSS nowadays. That's my hot take.
I think that's an agreeable hot take.
Yes. I mean, maybe it's fun and to learn on the side, but if you're actually writing it at work, there's just better ways nowadays. Unless you have like a really specific use case where you like have to break outside of the box of tooling that's out there. Maybe that's what Scott's working on right now. He said he was doing some sort of graphical thing with code earlier.
I like to build UI. So, I mean, if you like to build UI like we did on the design system, then you need to know how these features work. But okay.
No, yeah, I think that's a good highlight. I think maybe Dillon and I are maybe okay. I'm going to use this word, but it's going to sound wrong. Is like a higher level.
That's completely incorrect.
I think not. No. I mean like higher level of an abstraction, right? Like Dillon and I probably. I'll speak for myself. Maybe not Dillon, but I don't like personally. I don't care to write CSS manually anymore. It's just not something that excites me. And so I reach for those abstractions, like Dillon was saying, like Radix or ShadCN UI or whatnot. And and that's perfectly fine. And so I think there's engineers that are fine with working at that. I think there's also engineers like Scott that specialize in really
All right, now you're
drive interest
insulting me.
in,
I don't
you
specialize.
know, the layer below that.
No,
Okay,
I
all right,
started
sorry,
my
but
career
find
building with
interesting.
UI, and I find that fun. I want to build better experiences for people
Yeah,
using a
exactly.
thing. That is fun to me. I like to do the other stuff. I like to
Yeah.
build data transformations and
Yeah.
make things work. But what you're saying is you're working on different problems. Like front end engineering is still
Or
building
not necessarily
UI.
that, just that we find interest. We have different interests. Yeah, I know, but we have
Sure.
different interests in the scope of front
An
end.
attack
That's
on
what I'm
me.
saying.
Jesus.
And I think both are valuable.
Lord.
I'm not attacking. I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying the same thing you said. All right, we've gotten maybe way too spicy.
You didn't even rank my spicy take. You just ripped it apart.
That's what's
A
our scale
spiso
again?
scale meter, whatever we call it. The Taco Bell rankings.
The curry spisometer.
Oh man, this segment's gonna change to like somebody gives a spicy take, and then we just try to like prove them wrong.
Outspice them. Yeah.
Big CSS sucks. If you're
The debate
using
segment.
CSS, you're a junior engineer.
That's a spice. That's a lukewarm take.
That's the take that I got from you.
It's funny.
I
Scott,
transcribed it out of your points.
My career
Yeah.
started the same way. It was like just CSS. I built everything from scratch, and that was like how I got into coding in the industry. I just feel like a lot of it's been abstracted away nowadays.
I'll go one step further. Yeah, I think because CSS is so much easier to use too. Like you don't really need to do as much with it. Like yeah, sure, we make components that do the work for us, but I mean, if you're telling React to put margin on a thing, or if you use Tailwind, you're probably passing a class name. Like it's some semblance, you're still using it, maybe just albeit not directly, but people are still building things with it, and you're telling your code to do that. Sorry, UI components is beneath Matt. Like, God forbid you work on a feature. That's beneath Matt.
I build everything in
He
Flash
only
these days.
transpiles, I don't know, web frameworks.
I'm all in on Flash. That's gonna be the future, guys. It's Flash. Trust me.
Flash literally doesn't exist anymore.
But also, who needs to write CSS when you have Figma generating their website? So like, you know.
Completely. Okay. All right. I'm not taking the bait.
All right. Any other closing thoughts? I feel like I think it was a good, healthy discussion. And we found out Scott
I
was
got a
wrong,
clothing
and then he was right.
thought.
I was wrong.
We had a whole episode about the shadification and how the web sucks, but you think CSS sucks, so you just contribute to the problem. You don't want to redefine patterns because you just want to use the ones that are there, but then complain hypocritically about the ones that exist. All right, I'm done.
What? I think that validates my thought. The web sucks, and it contributed to the web sucking is the fact that our specs, like CSS and HTML.
Oh my God, no! But you're a contributor. You don't want to make these changes. All right, I don't want to bicker anymore. This is getting cut out.
I think we should just keep talking and then fade the episode out at this point.
Thus ends the episode at 4 hours.
If you made it this far, if you made it this far, thanks for listening to the podcast. You can tell that like it's not a good thing for when we stretch out our recording sessions because we have so much to talk about. We need to schedule these more frequently, probably. Feel free to like share and share the episode with someone that you think should listen to it. That's how we get most of our listeners. Most of our 7 listeners are because people share it. Feel free to reach out in the Discord, community Discord, or on Blue Sky if you have thoughts or hot takes on this episode or reasons why I'm wrong and Scott is right. Feel free to share them. Otherwise, we'll catch you maybe next month.
Probably next week, right? But also feel free to pile on and tell me I'm wrong. I'm used to it. All punching bag.
Dylan's always right.
Well, Dylan's got the spicy
Scott and I are
takes.
always wrong.
They're getting spicier. I had a spicy tikka masala, so maybe that's why. I went from mild to medium this week, so I'm spicing it up.
There you go.
Spicy as whole milk, like you were saying earlier.
All right, guys. I think that's
All right.
All right.
Have a good
Peace
week.
out.
Later.
Peace.